Good morning, you bunch of drunks.
I was tired of my lady. We'd been together too long.
Allman in the morning. Common
Like a
Sense
worn-out
Radio.
recording.
Yes, it is. Hey, good morning this morning. Tim Jones in for Jamie Allman. Happy Thursday. Welcome to the third hour of the big show.
Yes, going by quick.
If you're just getting up, you missed a lot.
Yes, I'll catch you up.
But we'll give you lots more. Coming down the line here. Denise, good morning.
Good morning.
Got Katie in here this morning. And
Good morning.
Trisha's running around the back with duct tape and WD-40. And keeping the operation together.
Keeping it afloat.
All good. Hey, everybody's probably up and at 'em, so our talk lines are open if you want to give me a holler. 314-969-9797, right?
Yeah,
Just rolls off my tongue. There you go. Yeah, Denise, so the Lyda Cruisen takes the helm, and how about that? The next day, Chief Dodson retires.
Chief Dodson's gone, yeah.
It said in the paper that...
I think that definitely was a surprise. I mean, I don't think I'm alone.
Yeah.
I think most people seem very surprised about the retirement announcement.
It's just funny because you could easily, if you wanted to, you could read between the lines here. There's a line in the paper where it says, the mayor said, well, we sat down and had discussion about the department, and then, well, he retired. Kind of like...
I wonder how that meeting went.
I wonder what that future was, and it apparently didn't include him. But don't worry, he's going to be on for another year with a consultant's package.
Mm-hmm.
So don't worry, Chief Dodson will be just fine. He's an entertaining guy. You know, we've had him on here many times.
And what a whirlwind it's been for him. I mean, just in the past,
Yes.
going to run for mayor, not going to run for mayor,
Yeah, I wonder what he's going to do next. Probably make money in the private sector, like my old friend Chief Tim Finch from St. Louis County. He's doing great. He's got a nice little private sector practice going. A consultant, works with a lot of our major corporations. You know, I didn't know this until I was in the legislature. You learn a lot of interesting things. You learn that there's so much more than meets the eye in a good way. With a lot of our corporate citizens here in the state, and I'm sure every state's the same. Some of these corporations, they really run like government should run. Mm-hmm. They're like governments unto themselves in the sense that they have their own security teams and so many other things. And I didn't really realize they had their own like security forces, because a lot of these CEOs, they get threats against themselves and their families, and they're important people, important decision makers. They're not just that they're wealthy; they're important decision makers. And so, I learned that. I got to work with some of the corporate security folks here in town. Great people. A lot of them are former FBI, former Secret Service, former police. They're former detectives. Great people. Another thing you should read between the lines on. I'm really surprised my favorite local rag didn't put this on the front page above the fold about this alleged watchdog group. Anybody that calls themselves a watchdog group, raise your antenna. Watchdog group wants scrutiny of Senate pay-to-play allegations. There's a pay-to-play allegation every year, multiple times a year, probably in every state legislature, in every state in our nation, and probably across the world in every government. There's always somebody who's not in power, doesn't have the reins of power, access to power, that doesn't like what the people in power are doing. So they say, oh, well, they're doing it for money, or they're doing it for something. It's called a quid pro quo. And let me read between the lines for you on this alleged watchdog group. Okay, their parent company is a group called CREW, C-R-E-W. And if you go to crewexpose.com, you can read and read and read and read about all the people that are in the parent company of this group that is the watchdog group that filed this complaint. Now, mind you, no individual Missourian has filed any sort of complaint against anybody in the Missouri legislature this year. This is a D.C.-based, swamp-based, left-wing, progressive, heavily funded Soros connection group that is going after Republicans across the country. Why? Because Republicans run everything right now. I think the Republicans, the current number is there are 99 legislative chambers in the country. Mm-hmm. You guys know why there's not 100?
Why? I do not, no.
Nebraska has a unicameral legislature. They only have a Senate.
Oh, okay.
Nebraska has no House of Representatives.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that weird?
I did not know that.
Everyone's a senator. So they only have a Senate, which is strange. So there's 99. There's 99 chambers. There's a House and a Senate in every state except Nebraska, and they've only got a Senate, which is weird. But anyway, 69 of the 99 chambers are controlled by Republicans. There's like 34 now Republican governors, I think, 34 or 35, somewhere in there. We control the U.S. House, we control the U.S. Senate, we control the presidency. So in all these in these 69 legislative chambers, they're doing things that have otherwise always been stopped by progressives and the left and the Democrats. Tax reform, tort reform, labor reform, education reform. Although in education reform, there's a lot of Democrats that join with Republicans on that. A lot of inner city Democrats. Some of the rural Republicans are actually the problem there. Different story for a different day. So because of that now, they're having so much success. Republicans are having so much success at the ballot box. They're putting their policies into effect. These are things Republicans have believed for a long time. These things I just mentioned they're working on. Mm-hmm. Well, this watchdog group says, oh, well, there's leaders of the Missouri Senate that are only doing these things because they got some campaign contributions last fall. Can I tell you that all of these bills that the Senate is working on have been in the pipeline for about a decade or more? So either everybody's been on the dole for over a decade, even before they were in power, or this is bunk. I argue it's bunk. Here's who Crew is. They're funded by liberal mega donors. Their principal source of funding is ideologically liberal left-wing foundations. In 2013, which is the most recent year that the records are available so far, these groups paid Crew grants equal to 55% of its total reported. So the majority of their revenue comes from the foundation. Listen to these titles. The Foundation to Promote Open Society, which is controlled by George Soros. The Open Society Institute, okay? Soros. The Bohemian Foundation.
Jeez.
Democratic donor Pat Stryker and her political operatives. The Gill Foundation. The Gill family, left-wing Democrat. The Dyson Foundation, who Dyson was a former FDR administration official, longtime board member of the liberal group Common Cause. Okay, you get the picture. I can go on and on and on. There's about another 4 or 5 of them mentioned. They are linked with these are liberal left-wing mega donors, ideologically aligned with the far left. And so they lost at the ballot box at the state level. They lost at the federal level. They lost for the White House. They've lost with the governors. They've lost with the courts now, right? They don't have access to a lot of the courts, and a lot of these state governments are unwinding a lot of this ideologically liberal left-wing precedent by finally getting more objective constitutional adherence on there. Justice Gorsuch is the latest one on the U.S. Supreme Court. So they've got nothing left. So what do? They file complaints, and they try to get the FBI involved, which sounds very scary. And so now they're trying to do things. The left is clever. I'm not going to say they're not clever, but they've lost everywhere else. Voters have figured them out everywhere else. So what they're going to do now is turn to a new tactic, and that's to defame, slime, and smear. So this was not some aggrieved Missouri resident who feels that his or her Senate leader or representative is ethically challenged. No. This is some D.C.-based left-wing ideological think tank. So when the Post-Dispatch puts up headlines, Watchdog Group wants scrutiny of Senate pay-to-play allegations. No, they don't. The Watchdog Group wants the left-wing ideology to take hold and to have and to push back against reforms that have been in the pipeline since the days of Jimmy Talent, who we're going to be talking to very soon here. I mean, these are things that if I ask Jim Talent served in the Missouri House. I won't date him, but a while ago. And Jim would say, Tim, this has nothing to do with anybody paying anybody for anything. These are Republican tenets. So, the left doesn't understand doing something based upon a philosophical core. To them, it's always about more power and strengthen, and so on and so forth. So, the aforementioned Jim Talent joins us now. Jim Talent, bipartisanpolicy.org. Hey, Senator, good morning. How have you been?
Good morning. My ears were burning. You were talking about me.
I was. Hey, Jim, you may not have been following this on the state level, but the point I was just making was, and these things have probably been around since when you were in the legislature and from the beginning of time and will for the future. When someone loses the reins of power, what do? Well, then they start the smear campaigns. And I don't know if you saw, but an alleged watchdog group is accusing some of our Senate leadership of pay to play, basically for trying to put into law basics of the Republican Party platform.
Yeah, well, what people have to keep in mind is that when you run for office or when you lead a legislature and you have an agenda based on what you believe, the people who oppose the agenda are going to oppose you, and the people who support the agenda are going to support you. That doesn't mean you're doing it because they're supporting you. They're supporting you because you're doing it. You know what I mean?
That's exactly right.
Exactly. I mean, you and I have a set of beliefs, and there's and people who agree and groups who agree are going to support us. So, that's not only just politics. That's really what politics is supposed to be. Now, I don't know. I've not been following that really closely,
right.
So I don't know the details of it, but I know those people, and I like to see the Senate get some more things done. I mean, my problem with them is not what they're trying to do, but I like to see them get more of it done.
Yeah, I think that's mainly that's our biggest complaint, and you and I probably agree that in D.C. we'd like to see them move a little quicker as well,
absolutely.
Jim,
I'm okay with a filibuster if it's constrained enough so that it allows at least most of the major parts of the agenda actually to get voted on. If it's used as a tool to ensure that all the members have an opportunity to participate in the, whatever's on the calendar, I think that's fine. And I know you tried to do that when you were Speaker. I constantly worked for that during my career. But if it's used to just to shut down voting on anything, it obstructs. So I'd like to see them constrain a little bit more. But I expect that it may not happen until the next session, but I expect that they're going to hear the voices out there and they're going to move more things.
Hey, Jim, as a former senator and someone who I know respects the institutions of government, I didn't get a chance to ask you about what were your feelings on the Senate moving forward for the Gorsuch nomination. I supported it. I was fine with it because of everything Harry Reid did in the past. But I thought that it was just, like you just said, it was so patently unfair for what they were filibustering Gorsuch on. I was glad that McConnell moved forward and they approved him with the majority vote. What did you think about that?
Oh, I was too. I mean, when I was in the Senate, I worked with Senator Hatch, and we tried to get rid of the filibuster, at least on nominations, because the effect of it is to create a 60% requirement to get somebody confirmed, and I actually think that contradicts the spirit, if not the letter of the Constitution. I think the Constitution clearly contemplates that the president's appointment power is limited only to the extent that he cannot get a majority in the Senate for his nominees. So, I was very pleased to see that happen. I would have supported it if there'd been a Democratic president, because I just think, the voters have the right to determine the direction in which the government goes. And if you constrain the majority rule too much, then you're inhibiting their rights, and that's what I think is wrong with it.
Absolutely, we got to remember what's in the Constitution and what's not, and so I think that's a valid point. Speaking to Senator Jim Talent at Jim Talent, bipartisanpolicy.org. So Jim, let's move over to North Korea. We've got Vice President Pence over there in the Asian Pacific Rim area. We've got this carrier group heading there from Australia. We've got the North Koreans. I think yesterday produced this fancy video of their mythical view of missiles blowing up our western shore. Seems like hostilities are ramping up a little bit here. A lot of rhetoric being thrown around. How do you think the Trump administration is handling this?
Well, I like what they're doing so far. I always start off conversations by saying this is what happens when rogue regimes get weapons of mass destruction. I mean, it makes the problems of dealing with them enormously more difficult because it increases the consequences of the downside risk. Okay, that's how national security people look at this sort of thing. So what they're trying to do is to force a situation where they have to get rid of the nuclear program, and they're doing it with this show of strength, and everything is based on strength. I suspect they're interfering with the tests using electronic warfare. I hope they are. I mean, I don't have any inside information on that. And then they're trying to get the Chinese to go along with very strong sanctions on things like oil and coal and their use of the banks. And that's a good policy. Now, the problem is, if it works and puts the regime under too much pressure, there's a danger that it may collapse. And then you've got chaos in a country that has nukes. I like the policy, but there's just inherent difficulty in dealing with regimes like this. It's one reason we really, really need to keep Iran from getting nuclear weapons, and they're looking at that too.
I think this highlights that, definitely, Jim. And Jim, I think some people, some folks maybe on the more liberal side of things they're complaining that, there's all these hostilities now, and isn't this terrible what Trump's doing? And they're all, well, isn't that because, Jim, Obama ignored this problem for 8 years? Kind of what you just said. We had blinders on, right? We had the blindfold on. We weren't paying attention. All the Trump administration now is exposing how bad things have become, and that we better take some action now, like what they're doing to ramp back.
What people have to, you can't look at decisions like this in a vacuum. The issue is what happens if we don't do this. I mean, we have not dealt effectively with him since we let him get the weapons in the first place, and it's just getting worse and worse. And he's the one who's ratcheted up the tension with these tests and these threats. It's not the United States. Now, Obama's policy in Asia, Tim, was actually better, and I said this many times, than his policy in Europe and in the Middle East. But it occurred against a background of increasing weakness on the part of the United States, beginning with the decline in our military strength. If you try and pursue a policy when you're playing a weaker hand relative to the forces you're confronting, the policy is probably why Trump's defense plan is so important. I mean, we're seeing right now the value of hard power. It isn't so much to actually engage in the combat. It's to support the tools of soft power, of diplomacy and economic sanctions, and that's exactly what the president's using it for now. But you have to have the hard power. You have to have the carriers and the ships.
Hey, Jim, do you think can the Chinese, will they? I'm asking you to look in the crystal ball here a little bit. What can they do with North Korea? What do you think they might do? Well,
if they cut off the oil, they control some commodities that North Korea really, really needs. I also privately believe that they continue to have more influence than they'll say they have. Now, they have a couple of problems, Tim. One of them is if the regime collapses, they're worried about millions of refugees, and that's a legitimate problem. I would tell them, look, it's your problem. You're the reason this regime exists. If they hadn't intervened 60 years ago, we wouldn't have a North Korea now. Okay. Their other problem is they want a buffer state there. They don't want American and South Korean forces right on their border. Well, again, that's their problem. I mean, okay, you propped up this guy. You have to deal with him, and if you don't deal with him, then things are going to happen you don't like an increased presence of American forces in the region. But of course, again, you have to have the forces to have the presence, right?
Absolutely. Hey, Senator, we got to run. Thank you as always. The time always goes too fast. It was great speaking with you as always.
Okay, have fun today.
Hey, absolutely. That was Senator Jim Talent at Jim Talent, bipartisanpolicy.org. That's where you can follow everything Senator Jimmy Talent is up to. Tim Jones in for Jamie Allman. Keep it right here. We've got Rick Ankiel, the phenomenon, coming up next here at Allman in the Morning.